Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the final week of Romania Rocks, which started so brilliantly last night with Elif Shafak meeting Matei Vișniec. If you have not seen their conversation, I urge you to catch up with it on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. It is so worthwhile of your time, and while you are there, check out our other rock talks, Norman Mana and Ben Ocri, Andrei Codrescu and David Mitchell, Marius Chivu and Paul Bailey, Ana Blandiana and Fiona Sampson, Bogdan Teodorescu and Ian Rankin, Magda Cârnece and Deborah Levy, Ioana Pârvulescu and A.L. Kennedy, and tomorrow, Philip Böhm will meet Sean Cotter. We've had some great moments so far with our first Romanian-British Literature Festival, brought to you with the support of the European Literature Network. So let's keep on rocking. My name is Magda Stroie. I'm the acting director of the Romanian Cultural Institute in London. And today I invite you to watch a live discussion bringing together 7 Romanian writers currently living in the UK. Last week, we met 2 British writers who had made Romania their home. And I'm delighted for us to be once again joined by viewers on the social media platforms of the British Council Romania, Romanian Embassy in the UK, and the British Embassy in Bucharest, organizations with whom we have partnered up throughout the year to celebrate 140 years of British-Romanian diplomatic relationships. Being diplomatic is not something any of the 7 writers you will be meeting shortly has ever been accused of. And in charge of producing a spectacular fireworks display for our belated bonfire night is Paula Erizanu. Paula is the culture editor of the Calvert Journal. She's written on arts and culture for The Guardian, CNN, Dazed, Chatham House, The Architectural Review, and other publications. She has been shortlisted for the Words by Women Award as UK's Culture Journalist of the Year 2019. She published a book on the 2009 protests in Moldova, This Is My First Revolution, Steal It, and the poetry collection, Take Care. Have a great evening, ladies and gentlemen. Paula Erizanu, over to you.
Thank you, Magda. Hi, everyone. It is my pleasure today to introduce today's guests. I will try to be brief, but we are quite a lot of women writers here. So Stela Brînzeanu, Stela, could you wave, please? Yes, is a Moldovan British writer and poet. Her prose explores issues of identity, belonging, women's emancipation, and women's rights. She has published a novel called Bessarabian Nights, which deals with a difficult topic, and that's human trafficking and sex trafficking. But today she will read us some extracts from her new novel, which I'm looking forward to. Vica Demici, Vica, can you wave, please? Is a London-based poet, songwriter, and author of 4 books of poetry and short stories. She writes music and has authored the song A Century of Love, which represented the Republic of Moldova at the Eurovision International Song Contest in 2008. She's also written the lyrics for Eugen Doga's Waltz and is a UCL graduate in international relations and works in diplomacy. I don't know how she manages to do it all. Ioana Morpurgo, can you wave, Ioana? Ioana studied literature and cultural anthropology. She has researched the culture of transition in post-communist societies at Exeter University in the UK. She's written 3 novels, as well as articles, essays, and short stories. And in 2016, following the Brexit referendum in the UK, she organized a series of lectures and public debates on what unites us in Europe. She's also an activist of human rights and the environment. What is interesting to me is that she's also a member of the Green Party in the UK. So I will ask her something about that a bit later. Cristina Mureșan, Cristina, can you wave? Is a poet, blogger, and book reviewer. She moved to the UK in 2015, where she published her debut volume, Angel Dust. And since then, she's published poetry in anthologies in the UK and also in Romania and Mexico. Simona Nastac, Simona, can you wave? Is an art curator, critic, and poet. She studied art history and theory in Bucharest and holds an MA in creative curating from Goldsmiths University. She has curated exhibitions and live poetry events in London, Seoul, New York, Berlin, Brussels, Prague, and so on, featuring artists such as Anish Kapoor, Jaap Blanc, and Dan Perzhovsky, among others. In 2017, she published her volume of poetry, The Depressing Color of Honey, which won an important award in Romania. And she's performed at various festivals across the world. Andreea Iulia Scridon. Andreea, can you wave? Is a Romanian-American writer and translator. She was born in Romania, but she emigrated with her parents to the United States as a child and grew up in Florida. She studied comparative literature at King's College London and creative writing at the University of Oxford. She is assistant editor at Asymptote Journal, a fiction editor at the Oxford Review of Books, and she has published work in World Literature Today, Oxford Poetry, Asymptote Journal, and has also written a novel set in the 18th century Romania and a book of poems inspired by George Enescu's compositions. And finally, Andreea Vahnovan. Andreea, can you wave? Whose birthday it is today. So a happy birthday to you, and thank you so much for joining us on this special day. Andreea was born in Chișinău in Moldova. She later graduated from Babeș-Bolyai University in Romania, specializing in journalism. She ran a business in Cluj-Napoca in Romania for 12 years and has migrated to London in 2017, where she started a literary blog. So without further ado, we will start with an open discussion where I will ask two questions to the floor, and everyone is welcome to contribute. And then we will move towards more personalized questions and readings from our guests' works. So my first question is, what do you feel you have gained and what do you feel you have lost by moving to the UK?
Right, so what have I lost? I think one of the things that I miss most since I moved to the UK in 2000 is my mother's food. And that is something that I often think, and even though I have mastered a few recipes, they're not quite how she cooks them. So that's the thing that I miss most. What have I won? I would say that it's probably the fact that I can be who I am in this vast city. I love the anonymity of London and the freedom that it gives you and it gave me. So these are my two answers.
Amazing. I mean, you know, with decades of work, I'm sure we can all reach the levels of cooking of our mothers or grandmothers.
I hope so.
Ioana, do you want to go next?
Maybe. I'm not sure how coherent my answer is, but I'll do my best. I think probably what I gained being away from Romania is the experience of having a perspective without being daily involved in the things that I write about and that I'm very interested in. The UK has given me the chance to either through academic studying and work, but also through just conversations with another nation, with another society, to make my attempt to understand, for instance, where we are as a nation, where Romania is as a nation when it comes to issues like the environment and human rights and all such things that I've always been interested in. And so what I gained is some form of perspective, which I could check through conversation here. And I think what I lost, I must say, is really, if I have to reduce it to one thing that I miss, I think is the snow.
You get it in Scotland.
Oh yes, but I'm right in the south in Dorset. You see, just the other end of the country. I'm afraid. Don't go to Scotland very often.
Okay, thank you. Vica, do you want to go next?
You know, I moved to London in 2012 for a master's degree, and I still don't know what I lost, because I was coming here for 1 year only, and I wasn't planning to stay after that, let alone moving my son here for his education later. But little did I know at that point. So I didn't have time to think about losing anything, because everything was just an amazing experience. Those 12 months in London in this cultural hub gave me so much joy and so much culture and knowledge and new friendships that I didn't even have time to think about having lost anything. I think I only gained a new life, and it's a new experience and a new level.
Amazing. Very, very positive. Andreea?
So because I have been living in Anglophone countries since I was 5 years old, I think the question is a bit different for me. And I wouldn't really know what I would be like in another scenario, in the sense that there is no before and after in my situation. Therefore, I would say that I've lost a certain sense of normalcy. However, I would say that it has made me adaptable. I've developed flexible thinking, and it has made me a irrevocably modern person. I am a product of modernity and the current situation of our world and our country.
Global child.
Yeah.
Simona?
Well, I think it wasn't really a choice for me to move to England. I came here first to study. I did a master degree in curating. And then I worked for almost 8 years as a project manager at the Romanian Cultural Institute. I was Magda's colleague, actually. So what I gained in, I don't know, in this profession, a lot of experience that I didn't have before. And at the same time, I lost probably other opportunities to advance in my curating career profession, because it's far more difficult here to actually be able to curate exhibitions for many reasons. I will not go into detail. But at the same time, I guess I gained love because I met my better half here, and also poetry because I started to write poetry in England. And probably what I miss the most, I miss my friends that I could meet easily and spontaneously in Romania, and I can't obviously do the same here now with my English friends, or I don't know, international friends that live in London. So this is what I probably, yes, miss the most.
Lovely. Cristina?
So similarly to Vica, I suppose, I came here thinking I would stay short term, but then I ended up staying much longer. I actually came here to publish my book. I was a blogger at the time in Romania, sharing my poetry and short stories on my blog. And then luckily, my English editor discovered my blog, and we ended up collaborating, and we ended up publishing a book together. At the time, I came thinking I would be here just enough to publish the book, but then life took over and I stayed. And I'm not sorry. I don't regret anything. So this is the country where I became a published author, so it will always mean a lot to me. I feel like I've gained a lot in terms of identity, if it makes sense. As my time here progressed and I integrated more and more here, you kind of developed another identity on a side of the one that you already had, the Romanian one, I should say. And it's another culture that you know better, and you learn so much from those values. And then it's a lot of value in comparing those two cultures and making the most of them. And then you grow as a person as much as a writer, I should say. In terms of what I've lost, I don't see it that way. I don't see that I've lost something, but I miss more quality time with my friends, of course, and my family. But I make sure to go back to Romania as often as I can and have more of my mom's food, like Stela mentioned. Yes, thank you.
The mom's food is a theme in here. Anda,
my mom's food.
Happy birthday again. And do you want to answer the question as well?
Yeah, thank you very much. First, I want to tell you about my English is under construction. Please forgive my big mistake. It's not easy for me because we come, all the family 3 years ago, to England for my children to do the chance to learn here, to meet the multiculturalism and to finish their study here. Like a parent, I understand that to grow up, to raise the children in the little country, little community, sometimes it's not enough in our time, and we try the best for them, and we move just for this reason. And if it's about me, I overcame my fear because all my children encouraged me. We'll be okay. We just to try. If it's not okay, we can come back. Yeah. Maybe the Oyster adaptation in all the family. It was in my situation. It's not easy.
I can imagine so. Thank you so much. So thank you all for your very varied and honest responses. It's not an easy question. And then my next question open to you all is, how do you find living and in some cases writing into languages? So in my own case, I came here to the UK to study first, and then I started working as a journalist. And so I find that my English, for instance, is more academic and more journalistic perhaps than my Romanian, where I feel more creative in my writing. And I was wondering to what extent, you have come across differences in the way you express yourselves, in the way, in the thoughts you have in these different languages, and whether you have managed to develop a sense of humor in English as well, because there's this saying that actually you only reach a degree of comfort in a second language once you actually manage to make other people laugh, which is not so easy from the beginning. Who shall we start with?
I think for us, those who were born in Soviet Union, we got used to this commute between languages and cultures. I was first discovering the culture and languages and literature and music at my music school back home, studying in Russian. I fell in love with the poetry of Pushkin, and then I fell in love with the life stories of Tchaikovsky and Rimsky-Korsakov at this school. And then suddenly the country crashed, and we rediscovered this joy of reading poetry by Minulescu, by listening to Enescu masterpieces, and we fell in love with those, and we commuted to more Romanian, and we started writing in Romanian more and more, and hopefully better. And then later on, when I joined the diplomatic mission, I never studied English at school, nor did I study it at the university, but I met a lot of people who were speaking English at that job. So I commuted again, and threw myself with a lot of enthusiasm in adopting this new language and this culture and the books that they were recommending, because I was extremely lucky to work with great minds who inspired me and pushed me up. And this is how I ended up in this country, by following those advices and those inspirational minds that worked with me. And when I moved here, I realized that everything that I knew before, I have to just forget, because I have to become really cerebral here and use the few words that I know in English in order to say a lot of things that my mind was trying to convey as a message. And this became really mathematical, and this became really a challenge. And I was always trying to make sure that people understand that although I speak with an accent, I can think without an accent. So again, this commute into a new way of talking and a new way of writing, I think it was another echo from what we are used to since we were teenagers and we were being thrown into another culture every 10 years.
That's really interesting, because I mean, we're of different generations, and I guess I don't consider myself as bilingual in Romanian and Russian as your generation does. But now we share the kind of the bilingualism in English and Romanian. Who would like to go next?
I was just wondering whether any of you have experienced the joy of this no man's land, when you find yourself fluent in both languages and able to make your choice how to express yourself effectively. Whether people experience this as a sense of betrayal of one language towards the other, or on the contrary, as a sense of an extra layer of interestingness, I expect. You know, in my case, for instance, I really, it just simply doesn't make any difference. As well as I can express myself, I can as well, as much as I have something interesting to say, really it doesn't matter. Not only the language that I express it in, but it doesn't really matter the style that I express it in, whether it's lyrical, whether it's prose or essay, or I think really that every worthwhile idea attracts its own form of expression, and you can't force it into another style at all. You can translate it in another language, but otherwise it comes with its own perfectly deliverable shape. So that's why I think it doesn't really matter whether it's English or Romanian or Chinese or whatever you speak, as long as what you have to say is worthwhile and it's not a waste of time. So maybe I should not carry on speaking. That's fine. What do you think?
So if I may say, I quite agree with Ioana on those lines. For me, I found the commute between languages quite easy, I suppose, because I was a multilingual child. I speak 5 languages, and I've learned most of them as a child or teenager. For those reasons, I suppose I started writing in English from the very beginning. So even when I was still in Romania and I was a blogger, I was writing only in English, which of course some people find quite unusual, I suppose. And that is the reason why my editor could actually read my poems and contact me, and we ended up publishing the book. After that, I suppose there was a sense of improving the language while being here, and learning how to use the language more and more to express deeper ideas and deeper emotion. I guess this comes with time. And for me, I only find value in using various languages. And I always saw language as a tool. As much as I love Romanian, absolutely, I love Romanian. But for some reason, I find writing poetry much more easily in English. I don't have a logical explanation for that, as much as I would like to. But this is how it comes to me very naturally in English. And as much as I love Romanian, like I said, I think language is a tool. And you can use whatever language you want to express specific ideas and thoughts and emotions better suited for that language. I, for instance, use sometimes French or Italian, and I often get a word that I need in a moment just in a certain language rather than the language that I need, because there's a word that explains it much better in another language. It's hard to explain, but anyway, this is my case.
You're very lucky if you find it so easy to adapt from one language to another. It's amazing. I was curious, Andreea, what your experience was, because to you, maybe English is more of a native tongue than Romanian is actually.
First of all, I feel quite privileged to have access to an additional canon as opposed to my English language peers. It almost feels like exclusive access. I started reading Romanian novels and poetry when I was a teenager, and I think it definitely coincided with my desire to be a writer, actually. But to answer your question, I would say that in equal measure to my identity problem, or lack thereof, I suppose, it comes very organically to me. I have found myself beginning a poem in Romanian and ending it in English and ending up translating it entirely in English. So that definitely works, I would say.
Amazing. So who else hasn't spoken yet? Anda?
I can just compare with Russian languages because I grow up with Russia, and it's not about English yet, yeah. But I understand one important things. If you dream, in your dream is the Romanian languages, this is your languages. I never in my dream spoke in Russian. Why? Because it's not my identity. Yeah? Yesterday, Matei Vishniek say some about his identity and said my identity is Romanian language. Yeah, Matei Vishniek speak on French very good and English too. Yeah, but we now tell about our languages, what we feel more deeper, more our. Yeah.
Thank you. And we have Simona.
Yes, well, I started writing poetry in Romanian actually, and quite recently that happened in 2017. But before that, I used to write art reviews, exhibition reviews. So I wrote both in Romanian and English. And then at the Romanian Cultural Institute, I had to use both languages most of the time, actually, writing and spoken language as well. And I have a quite, I don't know, complex relationship with English because I'm not as fluent as I would like to be and not as nuanced as I would like to be. But this gives me an opportunity, I guess, to learn more about language in general, because I check up words, their meanings, their synonyms or uses in different contexts. And it's a learning process that somehow is enriching And I feel sometimes frustrated because not wanting actually to improve my English. I don't read in Romanian as much as I used to. And it's in terms of productivity, I guess I'm slower, and also in reading and also in writing. So that's frustrating. But as you said, Paula, actually, I felt more creative in Romanian. However, once I actually motivated myself to write more in English, then I started somehow to, gain gain some power, some strength. And I actually do now I have this kind of constant, I move constantly between the languages sometimes. And I made a joke that I use Google Translate to translate myself, and never with the same results, because if I check, sometimes I check Romanian words translated into English, because they give more meanings actually than a Romanian dictionary. And that's actually a strange process that I have to, in order to look for multifaceted kind of meanings of a certain word. And Romanian seems, for some reason, or maybe dictionaries are not as comprehensive as English online dictionaries, at least. So I don't know, it's a complex relationship, but I hope I will be able to, write more in English. That's my aim anyway. Yes, write poetry, literature, yes.
Really interesting. Yes, I find myself using the dictionary on a day-to-day basis in both languages now, because once you migrate, you actually need to work on your native tongue as well. It becomes an effort in itself. Stella?
Yes, I think, well, I am more comfortable with English, and I guess it's because of something similar to what Vica touched upon earlier, the fact that we have a problematic relationship with our mother tongue. We were told that we spoke Romanian, that our language was Moldovan, not Romanian, and we have a problematic history, a complex history, identity, language. And so when I moved to the UK, in my rush to assimilate the English language, I kind of lost the nuances of the Romanian language. And it became easier for me to write in English. And as Andreea mentioned, dreams, I actually remember that even though I still used to write in Romanian and my diaries were in Romanian, 7 years after I moved to the UK, I had my first dream in English. And then it almost like a switch in my subconscious, it suddenly started to become a lot easier. It came a lot easier to me to write in English. And yes, you was talking earlier about what makes us, what changes do we see in talking English. And I would like to say that moving to the UK actually made me more assertive, and it made me more comfortable in expressing who I am and writing what I hold close to my heart. And that you see in Bessarabian Nights, in the latest book, and in my poetry. And that, like I said, it comes a lot easier through English.
That's really interesting that you've become more assertive when you moved here. So to the viewers who didn't understand perhaps the makeup of this conversation and of this group. So Stella, Andreea, Vica, and I are from the Republic of Moldova, and everyone else is from Romania. So we have a mix and match of different kind of historical contexts with which we've grown up. Stella, I would like to ask you to read a short extract from your latest novel.
So my latest novel is called Set in Stone, and it's a historical fiction novel. Similar to Bessarabian, and I find that in my prose, I have the same kind of themes reoccurring, and it's female emancipation, women's rights. It's the role or the conflict of religion versus spirituality, and the patriarchal mentality, a patriarchal country. And so the extract that I'm going to read now, previously in the previous chapter, right, I probably should say something about the book. It's set in medieval Romania, and it's a book about two young women from opposing backgrounds who fall in love with each other, defying their family, the law, and the church. So in the previous chapter, we see the village herbalist, or as people called her a witch, Rosalia, saving this young woman called Mira from near drowning in a frozen lake. So in this extract, we see Mira ready to go home after she had been looked after by Rosalia. Mira doesn't know how many days she's been in Rosalia's hut, but one morning she wakes up with no pain. The heavy fog has lifted from her head, and if it wasn't for the ugly gap in her hand, she would have thought it was all about dream. She's getting ready to leave, and because Rosalia, who is busy crushing strips of bark with a stone, hasn't said anything, Mira decides to ask the question outright. Will I be able to make pots? It's the only thing I know how to do. It will take some time to get used to it. Get used to working the clay again, or get used to being maimed and useless. The old woman is answering her questions by not answering them at all. Sorry about all the trouble, and thank you for saving my life, she says and turns for the door. It's your father you should thank. He has certainly learned from his mistakes. How's that? So the meadows were awash with wild ponies that day, their royal red spilling whichever way you looked. I was in the midst of a special ride, but I couldn't focus on it because your mother's cries filled the air. I turned up on your doorstep with a bunch of herbs to help her get through it quicker, but your father wouldn't let me. He said Lord Jesus Christ would soothe and protect his wife. Rosalia had finished crushing the bark and is scooping the coarse flour into a pot. Please don't judge your father too harshly. He loved your mother. It's just that he prayed for a miracle instead of accepting my help. You know what people think of me. He should have asked my mother and let her decide. The words catch in Mira's throat. Did you know her? What was she like? You have her looks, same green eyes, grain-colored hair, even the wee mole above your lips. And you have her fire too. I used to meet her in the woods often when she gathered pine wood for your father's kiln. Tiny yet feisty she was. Her bargaining with Boyar Constantine for the price of wood was legendary. Without her, your father wouldn't be the potter he is today. And that's the point that I make in the book, that very often throughout history, women have been in the shadow of men, and a lot of important things and groundbreaking work that women have done have not received credit for it. They have been robbed of recognition.
Thank you so much, Stella. I'll just ask you one question. How do you come up with the ideas for your book? So your debut novel focused on sex trafficking, and this one is set in medieval Romania. How did the ideas come about?
Well, even though they are set in two different time periods, they actually address the same kind of issues. As I mentioned earlier, it's the female emancipation and women's rights, and religion versus spirituality, which is huge in my work. And especially with Set in Stone, the medieval book, I wanted to explore the area or the time in history when women were taken to the stake, or they burned at the stake for their wisdom. Because essentially they were early scientists, they worked with herbs, and they were punished for it. So for me, that was fascinating. I wanted to delve into it and try and explore it.
Thank you so much. We're gonna go to Simona Nastac now.
Yes, okay. If I may, I will read two because they are very short.
Okay.
Okay. Prayer. The bare feet walk in your footsteps on salt, water, and fire. Lianas and bats spring out of my thigh. Breasts burst with rootstocks, fish, and honey. 3 hearts are crossing your path. Let's take our offspring to kindergarten. Feed them stories, tulip bulbs. The battlefield will blossom polychrome like a painting by Van Gogh. Father, give us our daily bread. the bacteria of happiness, and forgive us our trespasses. Words last longer than flesh. And the second, untitled. I have a white simple shirt with no pockets, buttons, embroidery, etc. Nothing at all. Has a spare button inside out. It's useless. A poem.
Thank you so much. I'm really interested in how you came to write poetry, because you said you started writing poetry in the UK, but you wrote in Romanian. Yeah. How did it all happen? How did you move from art curation to poetry writing, and how did the two communicate in your life?
Well, it happened quite spontaneously, and so it wasn't planned in any way. And I wasn't really reading poetry. I was organizing poetry events, though, at the Romanian Cultural Institute. So therefore, of course, I met poets and I read their poetry, at least. And it happened like on the move, on the bus, going to work, really. And my first poem was written in English. So it came naturally to me in English. But then I continued and in both languages, and I decided to publish in Romanian. So I don't know, I guess it was, my kind of poetic practice, writing practice is very much influenced by my visual art background and education. And I used to write art reviews where obviously there is a kind of challenge to always to vividly describe an artwork. And then I guess somehow that kind of language made its way to my poetry, to my other type of writing. But I don't know, I never actually dreamed of becoming a poet, never thought I will be one. So it happened, as I said, like by chance. And I like it and I want to explore it more. So I published my first book in Romanian, and I'm working on, I don't know, a chapbook, let's say, to be published in English. Yeah.
Amazing. What a serendipity, you know. We're gonna go to Vica now.
I will read you a few lines from my book of poetry in English that is on the way, and hopefully one day when I find a better balance between commuting between work and art, I will find time to finally make it happen. Statistics lesson. Vanished inside my own desert, overwhelmed by the dummy variables of my postponed dates, failing to remember the standard deviation of my decisions, hidden somewhere under or above precisions, caught in the middle of several admitted uncommitted errors, shifted and backspaced by the mean of means. I am more than an equation and less than a result. The more I fit into the right interval, the less I see myself in my own mirrors. I am on my own, completely, undoubtedly, undeniably alone, controlling for all other variables. Forecast. I bought a pair of Wellingtons, waiting for the rain season to start. And I put them on, and I kept waiting and waiting and waiting. 1 week of hope, 1 month of recline, before I took them back to get reimbursed for my waiting time. If I knew I could find my way to your soul's postcode, I could have kept living in a bona fide vicinity of my expectations that are never met for several seconds more. In fact, I don't need any shoes when it is so cold. I'm able to go barefoot when it is so wet. If I only could find my way to this indefinite proximity that is just several text messages away, to this bona fide vicinity, which I never saw, even though I have already searched the eternity.
Thank you, Vica. I'm really curious. So I think you're the only one here who also writes lyrics for music. And I was wondering whether you could take us through your process and what it actually means to write lyrics for another musician, what it means to write lyrics for yourself as a singer-songwriter. How does it happen, and how does it differ from your poetry writing?
It's a complex subject. We cannot talk about this in just several seconds. To bring justice to this subject and to speak in the defense of songwriters, it is much more difficult to write for songs. Although at some point, if you look at the lyrics that are made for songs, you would think that they are not as good as the ones that are made for books. And because I did both, I wrote poetry for my books of poetry before, and I worked with artists to create songs that would match the exact length of the line, the music line, that would only have that number of words and that rhythm that is required. I feel it is much more complicated and it's much more mathematical. You cannot add too many words when the track is only that long, and you have, in the end, you have to be able to look at this and have a perspective, and this has to make sense. It has to be about something. You have to convey a message, and it's really complex. It depends who is singing. You have to know the artist. You have to know what they would like to sing about. It's always a process of cutting and amending and chopping the lyrics that first looked like a poem. You just transform them and you make them really geometrical in order for them to fit the music track, but to still make sense. And you have not to be selfish. The writer who writes for songs doesn't have to be selfish, because you have to be able to understand that you chop your words and you amend them for a greater good, for something that will be an end project, an end product, the song that everyone will listen to and will feel the magic that only comes from this collaboration that you have between the songwriter, the composer, and the artist. So it's really complex. We'll have to have another talk about that.
I think you've explained it quite well, actually. I can see a guitar in your background. How often do you play it, given that you have a full-time job?
Well, I wish I could play more often, but I also have a piano, and it's well hidden so that I don't see it too much, and I have more time to focus on what the financial capital is not allowing us to be too artistic. You're always in a survival mood here, and I wish we could have more time to create more art and to be able to build bridges between our cultures and people from those countries and this country, but we have what we have, and
we do our best with it.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Andreea, would you be so kind to read, if you could read one text rather than two, that would be very helpful, because I think we're running out of time.
So I usually don't write social poetry. I consider myself more of a lyric poet. But this is a poem that I wrote with a sense of compassion for children who are bullied for where they come from, and for the child I once was. Romanian has become the day's Dadaist crack. Your ears, the single Romanian pair in the room, have grown enormous. Knowing as Buddha and rooted as Banyans, they have a better acoustic system than Carnegie Hall, and the final chimes of derision or shame hit against your timpani like droplets of rain on the windshield in traffic as mama drives you home from school. Now, whenever someone asks where you're from, your own eyes are factory glazed with a protective layer of irony. It makes for a charming, exotic effect, someplace between Latin and Slavic, these two prudent agate stones, with which you throw suspicious glances like arrows of love. But in the evening, after you've returned to your counterfeit home, you lie in the dark and watch Nadia's Perfect 10 on YouTube, granulated by pixels and time, the golden bird still lovely after its desecration.
Thank you so much. So you have a really interesting life story. So you've left Romania quite early, you've lived in the US, you studied in the UK, and now during the lockdown, you are in Romania, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, what do all of these countries mean to you, and where do you see yourself in the future, if anywhere in particular or everywhere at different stages?
I think it's difficult to say, to be honest. I do feel replenished being home, being here, being with my roots, as they say, which is why the image of the banyan tree with its huge roots comes up in the poem partially. Ideally, I think that I would have a difficult time being set in stone forever someplace. But I suppose one has to be pragmatic and see what will be the best possibility. However, having lived in so many places, I am a big believer in destiny, which I think also maybe has contributed to my formation as a poet.
Very interesting. And you've recently translated the short stories of Ide Sârbu and the poetry of Traian Coșovei. I was wondering how that experience was for you, because you said that for you Romanian also means having an access to a canon that your American and British friends didn't really have access to. So yeah, I was just wondering how that experience was for you and what translating kind of meant for you.
So it was an amazing experience. It really riled up my enthusiasm, and I became so involved that I would recommend translation as a form of developing your own writing to any poet who is able to do so. Particularly poetry, I would say. After all, fiction is a bit more difficult.
How did you choose these two authors in particular?
Through a simple coincidence. So I initially befriended my co-translator, Adam J. Sorkin, who is a great translator of Romanian poetry. And we only happened to realize that we had both translated Coșovei. And then Sârbu sort of came into my life again through happenstance, I suppose. A publisher was interested again through mutual friends. But I'm very glad that fate brought both of these authors to me.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to go to Ioana now. Would you be so kind to read us a poem or an extract of a novel? I think you were reading a poem today, right?
I'm going to go for a poem because it's shorter and it doesn't require the context that except from a prose would, and also because it connects with one of Simona's poems. It's also a prayer. It's a prayer for sea crossing migrants across the Mediterranean. For the rough edges of the wind, where Arctic turns, accustomed to the longest trajectories, lose want. For ghostly tides so gently depositing a body onto the dry hands of this earth. For the held breath of the moon, the land which broke, vicious, visceral, vandalized, and the foreign shore, barbed wire and tranquilized. For those whistles fitted into the side of a safety jacket, now floating at the end of the string like bait for mortality. For the knee which surfaced for an entire hour, then the orange sea turtles, inert in their hundreds, carried further and further apart. For all the plankton brushing against eyelids and foot soles and the music miles away, melting into this darkness, above the contrails invisible in the night sky, the men with the camera waiting on the usual beach where currents oblige, for the child who trusted and the mother who hoped, for the men who had no other choice, may there be thought.
Thank you so much. So I was really curious about this project that you started during the first lockdown. You curated an international a project exploring the state of isolation, where 100 poets from 47 countries wrote several lines of poems in a kind of collective work. How did the idea come about, and what surprised you and delighted you in the process of making it come together?
Yes, maybe three really threads of thought came into this project to start with. One was that I found myself reading a lot more poetry than I had before, and also writing more poetry than I did before during the months of the beginning of the lockdown. And I was wondering why that was. Really, maybe in a secular world that we're living in, poetry is the closest that we have to prayer in a way, and the metaphor is something that it's more, can function both as a magnifying glass towards reality, but also a protective filter between us and reality. And this particular role of metaphor in a situation of crisis was interesting to explore for me. And the other thread that fed into creating this project was I was just simply very curious how isolation or loneliness looks like in other corners of the planet, because I find myself living in a beautiful place by the coast, and I could go for walks even if just once a day as we were allowed, and have a garden, and I was with my family. And so the lockdown was a bit of a busy holiday, let's say, call it that way. But for many people around the planet, this doesn't at all look like this. And in fact, one of the poets in Airborne Particles, a collective poem, was describing to me in an email how it feels to live in Bombay, a city of 20 million people, where that is now was completely deserted and quiet. How eerie that was, how strange that was. So that's what I really wanted. I wanted to explore, to see how isolation and loneliness may look on 5 different continents, as many countries as possible, through the eyes of talented poets. And it took the shape of a renga poem. This is a Japanese traditional form of poetry, of which we are more accustomed to the first stanza of it, which is a haiku. And the rest of it can continue indefinitely. I mean, there are generations and generations that can write the same renga poem. We had to stop at 100, clearly, not go further on. But it was great to have all through the lockdown. The poem came back to me every morning, every day, and then I would send it on to another poem. So every morning I would have another image, 6 lines of interpretation of the state we were all in, from anywhere from New York to Bombay to Cameroon to Romania, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Such a lovely project, and such a great lockdown project as well. So I was also curious about your political activity. So you are a member of the Green Party in the UK, and I was wondering whether you were as political when you were in Romania. Were you a member of a political party there? And if not, how did it come about?
Yes, no, not of a political party, but I was always leaning towards the left. As you probably, or most of you probably know, it's kind of quite difficult to be on the left side of politics in Eastern Europe. You can be accused of being a communist nostalgic at its worst, or at its best, you're probably sort of associated with the wrong kind of political parties, which tend to be, at least in Romania, the left-wing party, pretty corrupt, and you don't want to have anything to do with them. But of course, there is always the conversation that it's never had there, and I would love to be able to discover that it will take place sometime soon, that the left-wing politics and socialism for the younger generation don't really mean communism anymore. They mean human rights, and they mean the green movement environment, which has inbuilt in it equality and equal sharing of resources and care. All these things. This is the sort of perspective that myself and many other people of our generation come from. So yes, I joined the Green Party here, and I've been voting with them pointlessly for quite a while. I was quite very interested and being very active. I'm also a member of Extinction Rebellion in Britain, and I'm very interested in where this is going to take us. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, I would argue that actually in Romania, left-wing politics are gaining more ground now, but maybe, you know, that's just my social media bubble with like hundreds of young people who, yeah, are like promoting a new kind of politics. Anda, I'm not sure whether you want to read a poem, or shall I just ask you the question?
No. I want to invite my daughter to read one poem because we don't have so much time for my reading. Yeah, sorry. It's the best. This is Roxanda.
Hi.
Hi, Roxanda.
I can't look at my hands. Often and often I avoid looking at my hands, as if they do not belong to me. But to my mother, when she was preparing my bag to go out into the world, she was wrapping each object in small bags. She was stretching their folds, arranging their corners, and at the end she was smoothing them once more. She asked me if I had forgotten my thick socks, and the wool sweater that she had also knitted for me from other two teased ones, not to be cold in the mountains. Next to it was waiting, wrapped in a bag of mats, the wool blanket received for alms at the funeral of grandfather Mihai, and a brand new cauldron bought from the central market with 2 kilograms of spilled buckwheat. Not to be hungry, she told me. They do not have buckwheat there. She put them together and tied them with a string. She stretched their folds and arranged their corners, and she smoothed them once more. The last thing was the long nightgown, which she sewed for me before I left. Wear your laps with dignity. She left it written with a pen on the inside of the nightgown. She joined me to the train station in one October morning. She stretched the creases of my blouse. She arranged its corners and smoothed it once more. Since then, I have been gone and further. My mother was the age I am now. Me, why can't I look at my hands?
Thank you so much. Such a lovely moment.
Yeah, thank you, Roxanda. It was part of my new book, who will appear in a few months onto Romanian editory.
Sweet. So Anda, you have kept a diary of your life in London since you moved here in 2017. That's also the year when you published your first poems. And in a recent entry on your blog, you say the things that surprised you about the city at the beginning have now become ordinary. What has writing meant to you getting adapted to life in a different city and a different country and a different language?
First, when I come, I don't have no expectation. I just want to live, to observe, to write about all is new, all is different. All the people ask me, how is the school? How is new? What is the different here? And this is the reason why I start to keep that diary all the month. Because for myself first, I understand that it's this multicultural society mean to accept all the difference, not to say, oh, it's a stranger people. Why stranger? Because it's different. If the people have another opinion, another behavior, sometimes we compare with our behavior, with our opinion. And I understand it's not about true or not true. It's about different, and we need to accept that. All the people ask me about why on my blog I all the time write just the good things about UK, because I mean just good things. This was it was my gift from England to me, to Romanian girl who come here and start again at 40 years old. Yeah, and I understand how much people who don't live never their country can't understand and accept a different style of life. I try on this blog to explain it's normal to be different. It's normal to have different tradition, to understand different things, to have different decisions. This is how first I learn, and I try to translate in my blog to the people who stay in Moldova, especially. But I have a lot of people from Romania who read my blog.
Thank you so much. And the final reading tonight will be from Cristina Mureșan.
Thank you. I'll be reading a poem called Verse, Color and Sound. It was published in a poetry anthology here in the UK. And just for a bit of context, it was inspired by an experience I had during an event at the Romanian Cultural Institute in London. I think about inspiration and its source and how it takes me by surprise. Like the time I was listening to a live guitar piece by a composer I knew nothing about, too powerful and unusual to analyze. So I close my eyes and listen in deep silence, and a thought comes to me like a gentle wave. It says this music sounds like a Salvador Dali's painting. It makes me smile in its weirdness, only to find out later that Dali and the composer had been friends. I try to understand where that thought came from, so I think about Carl Jung's archetypes and the unconscious, and about Einstein, who was simply playing in the garden when he discovered the theory of relativity. I know there is a link between my verse, Dali's colors, and the musician's notes. Maybe they are golden dust from a cosmic mandala that my brain is too small to grasp. So I settle for gratitude.
Thank you so much. So you said earlier that you grew up multilingual in like 5 languages. Can you talk a bit more about that, and then about your move to the UK and what determined it?
Sure. Well, I just learned I learned the languages in school, and I really loved languages, so I kind of took it quite easily. I learned French and Italian and Spanish, of course, English. So I always like to say that my brain became a bit fluid, so to speak, because of that, because I was really fascinated by languages and easily flowing from one to another. Later on, when I moved to the UK, I think I mentioned earlier, it was just a serendipitous moment when I was a blogger, and my English editor discovered my blog, and he contacted me later on and suggested we should collaborate and publish a book together. So I came for that purpose, really. It was a special opportunity, I thought, at the time, and I still think so. So we managed to publish the book about a year later. It took a bit longer than I had thought at the time. It was a lot of work, but I was very happy that we finalized the project.
What's next? What are you working on at the moment?
Well, of course, poetry will always be a part of my writing, and I'm always writing new poems. I'm not sure if the next project will be another poetry book. I've started playing with prose a bit more, and I've started writing a novella, which I had been thinking about for quite a few years now. But I'm taking my time. Like I mentioned earlier, I find it much easier to write poetry in English. But when it comes to prose, it's not as easy. It takes a bit more time and more structure. And so I'm taking my time to get something really good quality out of that. And of course, I'm also writing book reviews sometimes, which I find really a good opportunity to, of course, read more, explore, critical thinking, and yes, it was a very interesting experience overall.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your thoughts and your texts and readings today. I really enjoyed meeting all of you, and I hope our viewers have enjoyed it too. I wish everyone a lovely night and a lovely rest of the week.
Thank you.
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.